Good afternoon and welcome, Mr. Singh, to the BT at 100 Summit. We've discussed several sectors, but none as volatile and as politically sensitive these days as the power sector, for various reasons. We were discussing some of those just before we came in. I'll start off right away. Power is a critical element which will take us to 2047 in the manner in which the government and all of us aspire to. Yet, there is this view that whether power as electricity is something which can be given away without a cost to people, a section of people, or whether there should be something which should be charged like an economic benefit, as all economic benefits are charged. First off, we'd like to hear from you what is your thought, what is the government's thinking on this?
The fundamental thing is that nothing is free. Electricity is not free. It costs money to generate electricity. You need coal, you have to pay for it. You have workers in thermal power plants, they need to be paid. You have workers in transmission lines. People have spent money, invested money in setting up transmission lines. They need to get paid. It's not free. Somebody has to pay for it. Even if you are going to renewable energy, you have to spend money to buy PVs and set it up, buy inverters, set it up. It's not free. Now the question is who pays for it? As far as I am concerned, if somebody pays for it, bluntly, I don't mind whether it's the government which pays for it or whether, the government charges the consumers for it. But I'll give you a picture. But be very clear. It is either the taxpayer which is paying for it. That means it's going from the budget. That means all of us are paying, all of you are paying. Or the consumer is paying. So that is one question which you have to ponder upon. It's not Mr. Kejriwal or XY, I don't want to take names. It's not the Neta, who says that I'll give free 300 units or 500 units, who's paying for it from his pocket. He's not doing it from his pocket. And it's your money. So that is one. I'll give you another aspect. The other aspect is, today our consumption is about 1,450 billion units annually. At the rate our rate of growth is good, which is great. Now that also indicates that our economy is growing. Now at this rate of growth, my consumption, our country's consumption in 2030 will be 2,900 billion units, more than double now. My established capacity today is 404 gigawatts. In 2030, it will have to be 820 gigawatts. That means we have to add about 400 gigawatts between now and 2030. That's an average of about 50 gigawatts per year. Now, currently, no bank is willing to lend for setting up generating stations, especially in the conventional generating stations. You know why? The banks lost almost about 60 to 70,000 crores when generating assets got stressed. You would be aware of it. The knowledgeable people would be aware of it. Many generating companies went to NCLT, and the banks lost 60 to 70,000 crores. Now, today we are in a similar situation. The outstanding dues, outstanding payables by distribution companies to generation companies is 110,000 crores, 110,000 crores. And that is because the outstanding payables by the state governments to their distribution companies is 130,000 crores. So no money is coming to the generation companies for the power. No money was coming. I have taken remedial steps. So now it will come. So no money was coming to the generation companies for the power supplied because the state governments were not paying the distribution companies for the subsidies which they announced. The outstanding out of this 130,000 crores, 135,000 crores, 76,000 crores is outstanding against state governments on account of subsidies which they have announced, which they have forced their distribution companies to pass on, which they have not recompensed. About 62,000 crores is payable by the state government departments to the distribution companies for the power which they have drawn. So, if this thing continues, no capacity will be added. If no capacity is added, we shall be in a state worse than Sri Lanka, because the growth will continue till it comes to a halt. Why will it come to a halt? It will come to a halt because you can't have growth without electricity. You can't have industry without electricity. Now you can't have anything without electricity. Everything runs on electricity. So you won't have growth. And of course you'll have blackouts. So that's from this end. Analysis, global analysis. You look at it from the point of view of the state governments. Now, most of the state governments, barring 3-4, and you can count them on your fingers, barring 3-4 states, most of the states are revenue deficit. That means their revenue receipts, whatever their own taxes, the state share of central taxes, all that combined, does not meet their committed expenditure today. So they have to borrow to meet even their committed expenditure, which is salaries, pensions, repayment of loans which had been taken in the past, repayment of interest and principal. So, for everything they have to borrow. Now, if they are going with a freebie, they are borrowing money and giving a freebie. Now, if you borrow money and invest it in assets which give a return, then that can go to pay off the loan. If you borrow money for consumption, you all run households. Think about it. You borrow money and you consume, what will happen? So that's the other angle. So basically, that is the question before us today. That is the question before us today. What do we want our country to be? Do we want our country to be something like Sri Lanka? And do we want irresponsible netas who care for nothing for what happens in the long run to their state or to the country, to buy votes just by announcing freebies? That's the question which all of us have to answer. And we need to call these netas to account. We need to ask them that, okay, you want to give a freebie? Do you have any surplus in your budget to give a freebie? Or are you borrowing to give a freebie? And who will pay for it? The succeeding generations will pay for it. Now, why do you want to burden succeeding generations just so that you can get votes? And what will happen if you don't pay for the electricity? We'll have blackouts, just like Sri Lanka and Pakistan have. We need to ask these questions because it's our country. It's not only their country, it's our country as well.
But Mr. Singh, this is a very important point you're raising, and a very, it's a very scary scenario when we say that, we can't even power our own growth and we might go the Sri Lanka way. The point here is, it is also, like I started off saying, it's a political question as well. Now, when you say, when a government or a state government is giving freebies or promising things which they then cannot pay for or have to borrow to pay, how does a government which, like yours, which does not believe in that theory, is there a political cost to this? And how do you account for that political cost? Or do you think the public is understanding?
There is no such thing as a political question. All questions are questions which are relevant to national growth, state growth, national development, state development. This is what a political question is. That is it good for the state? Is it good for the nation? That is what is the political question. This is actually a sort of a question of whether he will get votes by, by hook or by crook. That's that question. Now we have to educate the people. Because what is the type of country we want? Do we want our country to grow or not? If our country has to grow, then investment has to come into the power sector. And how do we make sure that that investment comes into the power sector? But as I said, we have taken steps. I'm not standing by like that. I have put in place a system whereby now, if a distribution company does not pay its bills, its access to the exchange gets cut off.
Yes.
Till it's paid. You would have read in the newspapers that access of 13 states to the power exchange got cut off. So that is the system we have put in place. Thereafter, 11 states have paid. Now two states, two discoms in one state and one other state, they are still outstanding, so they are still cut off from the exchange. And not only that, their long-term access, if they don't pay, their long-term access will also get reduced by 10% every month. So what I am saying is this, plain and simple, to all these people who think that they can get votes. Fine, you give electricity free to whosoever you want. You are not giving it free, it's the taxpayer who's giving it free. Because, you don't give any penny from your pocket. But you give free to whosoever you want, whatsoever you want. But if you want electricity from the national grid, you have to pay for it. And if you don't pay, your long-term access will get cut off, and your access to the power exchange will get cut off. Now, so that hopefully will bring in a sense of responsibility to these people. What we need is another, the instrument to bring in a sense of fiscal responsibility. Imagine netas borrowing blindly to give freebies so that they can win elections without any concern for what happens to the succeeding generation. Those loans have to be repaid. It's not that if the government borrows, it doesn't have to repay. Those loans have to be repaid. Most of these states, a bulk of their expenditure is repayment of loans, principals and interest. And that is going to increase. And that's going to increase to a level where they will become impecunious, almost bankrupt.
This point you mentioned was in fact going to be my next question about access to the grid. That move has actually caused a lot of interest because that has been seen as an important one where you flex the muscle and say that you need to have fiscal discipline, otherwise your access to the grid itself the exchanges will be cut off. So you think that is one way of starting to now explain to these defaulting states? It has worked. You said 11 out of 30.
13 states, some of my officers were worried, 13 states. So I said, I'm not concerned. You don't pay, your access to the exchange gets cut. Next, your long-term access starts getting cut. And I have made the system automatic. Some ministers rang me up, chief ministers. I said, I can't do anything about it. It's built into the system. It's automatic. Nobody can intervene. So now it's the system. If you don't pay, it's gone.
This point about indebtedness of states, Mr. Singh, is another very important one. Now, what is the way out? You can't keep bankrolling the states to pay their debts and then they do these fiscally irresponsible statements. What is your view on this? How does one... Can we let a state default, for instance? And what is the way out?
Yes, that's the question which has been troubling us. What happens when a state defaults? Because it's a question of a borrower not paying installments of the loan which he has taken. I have not seen any provision which sort of mandates that the central government will pay unless the central government has guaranteed a loan. So basically, I think that is an area which needs legislation, I would think, and which needs a national consensus when we bring that legislation. That legislation, I think, is necessary, whereby there is some mechanism for ensuring fiscal responsibility. And otherwise, you have situations which we see every day of, netas using, chief ministers using public funds to set up huge banners and posters showing them, showing their photos. And you see it every day. And those huge banners cost money. Full page ad in newspapers in Times of India, Hindustan Times. How much does a full page ad on the head, on the first page in Times of India cost? I think it must be costing about 50 lakhs or 60 lakhs, something like that, not in the region of that. And just you have that photo of that chief minister or somebody and saying something that, take a, switch off your car on a red light or something like that. What is it? Ye kya aisa? And it's your money. Our money. I also pay tax, you also pay tax. It's our money. Ye kya ho raha hai? These people have usurped our money for their own political ends. Now that is the question which our system has to ask.
Mr. Singh, alongside this is the new move on the electricity bill. Now that is another issue which is being discussed over and over again. You have been a big votary of the electricity bill. It is linked to power sector reform. Could you tell us how you think it will be a game changer?
Now, basically, what do we have? What is the system which we have today? It's either a government monopoly or a private monopoly. You think that privatization is a great reform. What are you doing? You are replacing a government monopoly, like say Bihar State and what South Bihar Distribution Company, with maybe XYZ company, Cisco or Torrent, but it's still a monopoly. Still a monopoly. That is not much of a reform. Since it's the private sector is more efficient, so its service will be more efficient, but still not a reform. What we need is competition. What we need is people competing on the basis of service and on the basis of tariff. Now our act, Electricity Act of 2003, imagine, 2003. I want to thank Suresh Prabhu, he was a minister there. He put in place a system whereby you can have multiple distribution licenses operating in the same area of supply. So that means competition. But there was a rider. And that rider was that those distribution licensees will supply electricity through their own distribution systems. That was impractical. You can't have multiple distribution systems serving the same area. One wire can carry a lot of electricity, so that wire should be allowed to carry the electricity of not only supplier X, but supplier Y, Z, A, B, C, D as well, and let them compete on both tariff and service. Now that is the system in some developed countries. Now that is what this bill seeks to bring. We are removing that clause. You see, multiple licenses have already been provided for. This is not something I am doing new. So, it was provided for in the 2003 Act, original Act. What I am removing is this clause, which says that the supply has to be through their own network. I have said that the existing network can be used by all licensees on payment of wheeling charges. Everybody will pay for wheeling charges. Whosoever owns the wire can transmit his electricity, and he will also have to mandatorily transmit that wire will have to mandatorily transmit the electricity of other suppliers as well. He'll get wheeling charges fixed by the regulator. So it brings in competition. That is one. The second essential thing is that in the past, some years that I've been here, I have seen numerous cyber attacks on our system. Numerous cyber attacks on us. We know where it is coming from. We have put in place mechanisms to ensure that we have an adequate defense, but those mechanisms need to be tested and need to be upgraded and need to be inspected. So we are empowering the National Load Dispatch Center, that they will ensure that the grid is secure. We have connected the whole country into one grid. Now that's great. Earlier we could transfer, say, about 33,000 megawatts from one corner of the country to another. Today I can transfer 112,000 megawatts, 112,000 megawatts from one corner of the country to another. We've added almost about 171,000 circuit kilometers, our government, 171,000 circuit kilometers. Now we are the largest single grid running on one signal frequency with one operator, one central grid controller. But that has a downside. If you have one grid, then if you have any collapse in one corner, the whole grid is in danger. That's the downside of having a unified grid. So our cyber systems have to be strong. So we provided for that, for the national controller to have the authority for that. We are strengthening the regulatory systems. We are adding one more member. That's an order of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that there should be a member of law. We are providing for that. And we are also giving them powers available to a civil court, which was necessary. And we've also provided, incidentally, what used to happen was that some regulators, because these regulators are appointed by the state governments, some regulators would act at the behest of state government, even to the extent of contravening the existing law and the tariff policy. So we provided that if there is a deliberate violation of law in any orders, that can be one of the grounds for removal of the regulators. Then renewable energy. We have emerged as one of the fastest growing renewable energy capacities in the world. We are the only major economy, whose energy transition actions are commensurate with a sub-2 degree rise in global temperature. We achieved our NDC 9 years in advance. We had pledged in COP21, our NDC was that by 2030, 40% of our capacity will be non-fossil. Now we achieved that in November 21. But we have a long way to go. We want to transition. Now transitioning is good for us. Number one, it's good for the environment. Number two, it brings the price of electricity down. Number three, I'll tell you frankly, my requirement of coal goes down. And therefore I can breathe easily. So energy transition. Now we have provided for renewable purchase obligations and penalties for that in this law. So this law is for the good of the system. And of course, it makes payment security mechanisms mandatory, whether it is in the PPA or not.
There is a view that this move on stopping access to the exchanges is a way of implementing the Electricity Act by, the new electricity bill from the other side. Do you buy that? Because
no, not at all. I mean, basically the rule itself is very clear. I mean, you may oppose the Electricity Act, but if you pay the bill, your access won't get cut. It's in the rules. It's in the system. So even if you shout against the electricity bill, but you pay for the power which you have consumed, your access won't get cut.
The other point you mentioned at the beginning, Mr. Singh, is that now banks also are wary of lending to power companies, power utilities, because of this indebtedness, because of this whole mess, in a sense, which is being created. What do you think is the way out? How does one get out of this?
These rules which we have put in place is the way out, and already the outlook has changed because of this rule being put in place. Now payment will happen. If any GENCO supplies power, payment will happen. There's only one, one sort of thing, drawback. That is that it does not take care of the state GENCOs, but that is the responsibility of the state governments. If their state GENCO is not paid, they will not have the money to buy coal. So then the state will suffer. Otherwise, any GENCO connected to the ISTS, if it supplies power, they will have to be paid. So that problem has been taken care of, and I feel that the financial world will now come forward to lend to the power sector, especially the generation sector. Incidentally, do you know, I was reviewing this situation. I have about 28,000 megawatts of thermal capacity under construction, conventional capacity under construction. Not 1 megawatt was private. Now that's scary. That's scary. Today, about 60%, slightly more than 50% of my capacity is private. 60%. So that is what we are looking at, Mr. Kejriwal and Mr. XYZ. That is what we are looking at. I mean, irresponsible politicians need to be called out.
Let's come to the renewable side for a bit, because that's really the big move, the big reform which the government is also very committed to. You have been a big votary that 500 gigawatts will be reached by 2030. What gives you that confidence, and how do you see that playing out at this point?
Two things. One, of course, that my demand is increasing. That gives me the space. That's a great thing. It's a great thing. So that gives me the space. The other is that renewable energy has become cheaper than conventional energy. It is still intermittent, so we have to add storage. If you add storage, then the prices come on par. Right now, renewable energy with storage will be more expensive than thermal. Yes. But that is a capacity which I can put up promptly. It is environment friendly. So, and I have put in place 2 or 3 systems to ensure this. One is, I have now opened up the sector. So I have said, earlier what used to happen was that only capacities which were set up through open bid and only capacities which were set up for supplying to distribution companies were giving the facility of free, the free transmission. I have changed that. I have said that anybody can set up renewable energy capacity anywhere in the world, either by himself or through a developer. He'll get the benefit of free transmission for 25 years. And I have now asked the industry to now switch over to renewables. I have also provided for open access being provided in 15 days. I have put in place a mechanism which will ensure that the open access is provided. If you set up renewable energy capacity anywhere in the country, Rajasthan or wherever you have, and you can transfer it to your industry, and you will get free transmission, and you will get open access. So now you can shift from thermal energy, from conventional energy to renewable energy. It will be cheaper. Your thermal energy prices are in the region of about, industry prices, industry, power costs are very high because of cross subsidy. And that is one of the reasons why our industry is not competitive, because of this cross subsidy. So the industry has to pay somewhere in the between 8 rupees to 12 rupees per unit. That's what the industry has to pay. Renewable energy, solar today is available at 2 rupees 30 paise, 2 rupees 40 paise. So if you switch over to renewable energy, solar, wind is about 280, 290. You will reduce your power costs. And I have exhorted all the entire industry to announce dates when they will go green, entirely green. I have also given an option to the industry that one, you can set up capacity yourself. Second, you can set up capacity through any developer. Third, you can give a request to the distribution company, and the distribution company will have to comply with that request, where you can say that I want my electricity to be 50% green, 75% green, or 100% green. And for that, you will have to pay the sort of cost of green energy, and it will only be the cost of green energy plus the distribution, transmission and distribution charges. It will be cheaper than conventional energy. Now, so after that, I have exhorted the industry, Indian industry. I am writing to all the industry captains. And Mr. Puri, I'll write to you also. I'll write to India Today also, group also. Announce a date for going green. Say that by 2030, 50% of my sort of consumption, I'll be 50% green. And I announce a date that by 2060 or something, the India Today group will be totally net zero. And let's do that. That's the only way that will become net zero. So one thing which I have put in place is this, opened up the sector. And the other, of course, is green hydrogen. Now, for green hydrogen, for 1 million tons, you need 25 gigawatts. And we are going in for green hydrogen in a big way. That's the fuel of the future. So I'm quite confident that I'll achieve my target.
But Mr. Singh, it is still a journey. It is still, and coal is not going away anytime soon. Last year, we saw one of the worst problems for the power sector because of this shortage of coal. What are you doing with the other ministries? What discussions are you having so that we don't have that problem repeat again?
Yeah, you are right. Basically, coal is something which does concern us. It's concerning me now, even now. I mean, if you look at only domestic coal arrivals and my consumption in terms of domestic coal, the consumption is about 3 lakh tons. Yesterday, my consumption was about 3 lakh tons more if only than the domestic coal arrival. So if we had not started blending, I mean, we would have been in darkness. So it's a matter of worry. Now, one, of course, is there are 2 or 3 things. One is expanding the mining. The second is logistics. There are many areas where coal has been mined, but transport has become a bottleneck because the railway lines need expansion. That's the other thing. What I am doing is I am building insurance. You would have seen a bid for 1,000 megawatt hours of storage. That's one of the largest bids in the world, mind you. So I am doing 2 things. One is adding storage with renewable energy. So I'll have round-the-clock energy that will replace coal. The second is I am, the sort of adding to my hydro capacity. I already have about 14,000 megawatts under construction. I intend to have at least 25,000 megawatts under construction. So I'm adding to my hydro capacity. I am adding to my pumped storage capacity, so that I have round-the-clock renewables. So battery storage, pumped hydro. Now that is something which will sort of ease the pressure which I feel. During the time when there was a crunch, almost from 25 to 30% was coming from non-fossil sources, mind you. That's because we added so much of renewable energy capacity. So I'm adding renewable energy capacity. Coal is an issue, but I mean, basically, we are doing energy transition. We are doing energy transition because we believe in the environment. Our government believes in the environment, irrespective. Our government believes in the environment. So that's why energy transition is good for me. It is good for the environment.
So hopefully 2023 summer you will not be worried.
No, I don't think that I should be worried. I should have put in place mechanisms. There's one more thing which I am doing. And, I have about 25,000 megawatts of gas-based capacity. The spot price of gas is about $50. Now, that will translate to, the power cost of about 11 to 12 rupees per unit. So, if I buy on the spot, it won't work. But if I get into long-term contracts, it's just about $16, which will come to about 6 rupees, 7 rupees, which will work. So that is again something which we are going to put in place. So we'll have gas to meet the 2 periods of crunch which I face, which is around April, May. That is one. The other is August, September, October. So I believe in having multiple insurance systems. It is necessary if you are dealing with power. So I'm putting in place multiple insurance systems.
More power to you, Mr. Minister, and hopefully that we will be definitely much better placed on the sector as we move to the next 25 years. Thank you so much for speaking to us so candidly.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. But one thing, if you want a country which is developed, if you want a country which is lighted up, which is bright, you'll need to fight for it. It won't happen by itself. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.